and a little bit more to the point, sort of summing up. He says, we had these two questions. One was, how do you know kind of what to interpret literally, what not to interpret literally? And the other question was, how do you understand the resurrection even if the body disintegrates? Scriptural passages, which are rather numerous, seem to prove, first one was that there are scriptural passages that seem to indicate that there's no resurrection of the dead. What do you do with those? And the second question is that the Torah doesn't seem to really mention the resurrection very much. You're wrong with my. Okay. So it says in regard to the second question, which was, why doesn't the Torah talk about it? The answer is that it's widely appreciated, except that the whole Torah was not conceived by Moshe, but rather it's from God. We therefore are faced with the need to explore the question in intelligent ways that God commented about the world. Why didn't God comment about the world to come in the Torah? Did not explain the resurrection of God did comment about the world to come. We'll have to ask where that is, but did not talk about the resurrection of the dead. The reason for this is that the resurrection of the dead will indeed occur as a miraculous event, as we have explained, and the credibility of such an event can only be based on the words of a prophet. That time, nearly all of mankind belonged to the sect of Sabians, believed in the eternity of the world. As I mentioned, Aristotle believed that also, and who considered the Almighty to be the spirit of the planets. And they denied the transmission of prophecy from God to mankind. All right, so the Rambam is going back here to a concept that he talks about in several different places, especially with regard to sacrifices and idolatry. Rambam is going to talk about how the Torah doesn't always tell you everything. The Torah was telling the Jewish people what they could understand for that time, right? In other words, for instance, the Rambam believes that sacrifices were not really what God wants. So why was there sacrifices? But that's what the Jews could relate to. And it's an educational process, the Torah, for the Jewish people, beginning at that time, to kind of get them out of their Egyptian mindset. And that actually a lot of the mitzvahs in the Torah are there to get them out of idolatry. So that's what he's going to say here also. According to their belief, they're forced to deny the verity of miracles and attribute them instead to sorcery and cunning. Thus, we perceive them attempting to belie the miracles of Moses, our teacher. Right? Apparently, at his time, it sounds similar to our time, people did not believe in miracles. We've seen this day, God spoke with man, he liveth, showing that prophecy was something they thought impossible. How could the Torah describe a basic tenet, like the resurrection of the dead, which requires belief in the words of a prophet, to someone to whom the whole concept of prophecy is unacceptable? In other words, what it's saying is that you can't sort of explain the resurrection of the dead scientifically. Scientifically, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, not that they were scientists, but in terms of the materialistic world, it's not something that makes sense. It's something that you have to accept based on prophecy. But he says that the Jews at that time were not people who had a clear belief in prophecy. They believe in the eternity of the world. And if you believe in the eternity of the world, you do not believe in miracles. He says, were it not for our belief in miracles, we would not be able to consider resurrection dead as a possible occurrence. So the more that you have a problem with miracles, the less, the more you can have a problem with the resurrection of the dead. So he's saying, whether it's true or not, I don't know, he's saying the Jews early on did not believe in miracles. And when the Almighty God wished to give, so therefore God didn't want to, he's going to say here, the Almighty God wished to give the Torah to mankind to make known through the prophets positive and negative commandments throughout the world. He produced great miracles recorded throughout the Torah to authenticate the prophecy of the prophets in the creation of the world. For a true miracle is clear proof of the creation of the world. I mean, for us, it's a little different, but for him, like the creation of the world not being eternal, as we mentioned last time, and miracles are really bound up together. He did not exclude them from the matters relating to this world, such as reward and punishment, and from natural phenomena such as immortality of the soul. And it's interesting, he believes that the immortality of the soul is not miraculous. It's obvious. It's a natural phenomenon. It's part of this world, right? Because for him, philosophically, the soul is something eternal. The soul, the intellect, and it has to do with the way the Rambam sees spheres. It's an Aristotelian universe in which the spheres are intellects and connected to the divine, and the human being's intellect can connect them through something called the active intellect to a higher level. And therefore, the soul fits into the Rambam's physics, what we would call physics, whereas the resurrection of the dead is totally miraculous. That's why he seems to have more of a problem with one than the other. Matter continued this way until the basic tenet became accepted and verified after the passage of generations. There remains no doubt about the truth of the prophecies of the prophets, nor about the occurrence of miracles. After that, the prophets narrated to us that they were told by the Almighty concerning the resurrection that they need to accept it. Notice, he's saying, why is the resurrection that talked about in the prophets and not, right, in the book of Daniel, for instance, not in the 5 books of Moses? Because in the 5 books of Moses, those Jews could not accept it. They would not have been able to relate to it. They only saw a materialistic world, this world, and the Rambam believes that the world to come is not far-fetched. That could be part of your physics, part of understanding of the world, but that the resurrection of the dead is something that you have to have a belief in miracles. You have to have a sense that the world was created by God, and that therefore there can be miracles. I think also the reason that there can be miracles that's created by God is that the miracles are less miracles. They're actually part of the creation. As the world is around forever, you have to project backwards all the laws of physics, laws of the world, backwards and forwards. In other words, you can't have any miracles. But I think that's why the created universe is connected for the Rambam to the idea of miracles. Whereas if you believe in an eternal universe, you would have to deny miracles, which Aristotle, I think, would do. One finds that the Almighty himself took such an approach to the Israelites. It says that God, right, when God takes the Jews out of Egypt, actually in this parsha, says God led them not by the way of the land of the Philistines. Sorry, next week's parsha. God led them not by the way of the land of the Philistines, but rather because he was worried. You could go directly from Egypt into Israel. They border each other. God took them around the Sinai. Why? Because God was worried that the Egyptians would chase after the Jews, or that the Jews would run into war with the Philistines, which is where Gaza is now, and then they would return to Egypt. So he didn't want to bring them that way. So he brought them around the eastern side of the Jordan. It takes much longer, but that's why he did it. Just as he gradually acclimatized them to the matters of the world, for fear they would go back to Egypt, he further feared they would not accept this tenet. Now, God couldn't tell them about the resurrection of the dead because they would say, that's ridiculous. Whereas the world to come, he could, although that's not really in the Torah either. No, he's making an argument generally for why the Torah only has things of this world, saying that's all the Jews could relate to at that time. How could they not be? And God wanted to gradually teach them these things. It is well known, that's why they only come up in the prophets, that these people to whom the Almighty wished to have the Torah understood in their time adopted erroneous ideas. It was said of them at the end of 40 years, they'd seen all the miracles of God, but they didn't really believe in it. God, may be blessed, knew that if he would tell them about the tenet of the resurrection of the dead, it would be so strange to them, it'd be very difficult to accept. And they would make light of transgression, since punishment therefore would not occur until much later. Very interesting. In other words, he's saying that if you believe in a world to come, then you'll keep the Torah. Whereas if it's about the resurrection of the dead at the time of the Messiah, that'd be like too weird for them and too far off. Therefore, they wouldn't keep the Torah. Therefore, he frightened them and assured them. We relate to things in a little bit of a different way, but he's saying that's how the Jews were. Good and bad, which would come speedily. In other words, whereas the world to come is much sooner. In theory, it's right after you die. So there's a great benefit. Improves worldly matter. Mention the Torah that it is a permanent sign, that is, say, the improvement of things for Jews by serving the Lord in their disobedience, right? In the Torah itself, reward and punishment is very this worldly, saying that's what the Jews relate to. So the opposite of the resurrection of the dead. We've already explained the sign applies to the judgment of God by Israel. Let's see. Also appropriate is the widely known saying among the nation, if a person sees afflictions coming upon him, let him scrutinize his deeds. That's a quote from the Gemara, that if a person experiences pain, they should examine their deeds. Same idea is intended in the scriptural passage, describe the uniqueness of the nation. This passage means their destiny does not follow the same course as that of other nations. Rather, through this great miracle, God made them unique in their actions, so it's responsible for success of their failure. Right? He's saying that for the Jewish people, it's very much this worldly. Now, the Rambam doesn't think it's really this worldly. The Rambam is saying that it's more than that, it's the world to come, but that's what the Jews are told in the Torah, that it's this worldly, of the rain in its time, etc., because that's what they could relate to, very materialistic of this world. And that which now, at the conclusion of our treatise, remains for us to elucidate. What's left to explain, even though it's more important than everything else before, is that miracles are sometimes outside the realm of nature. He's going to talk about the different types of miracles now, such as the conversion of the rod of Moses into a snake and the opening of the earth which Korah was swallowed by, the splitting of the sea. Right? Those are miracles in the Torah which are supernatural. Other times, miracles occur in manners which are consistent with the laws of nature. For instance, the locusts, the hail, the pestilence in Egypt, right? Those are just miracles because of when they occur, not what they are fundamentally. Whereas changing a rod into a snake is a miracle fundamentally, supernatural. It's common that these types of occurrences occur at certain times, certain places, such as the rending of the altar. Right? So he's saying, locusts can come. That does happen. It's just the timing that's the miraculous part. It's not unusual building. Another thing here. However, these incidents, which are within the realm of possibility, are in fact miracles because they fulfill one of the following three conditions. First of these is the event occurred at precisely the time the prophet said. That's number one. That makes it a miracle. Second condition is the event occurred as an extremely rare type of occurrence, like the locusts coming, doesn't happen often. So it has to be predicted and has to come at the time. The third condition is the retraction, renewal, and constancy of the events, such as blessings and curses. In other words, the rain not coming in its time is not a miracle. But if every time the Jews are sinning, the rain doesn't come in its time, then that's a miraculous thing. Or if they occurred only once or twice, it would not have been thought of us as a miracle. But if it's a system, then it's miraculous. Now, of course, you could argue the opposite. If it's a system, it's not miraculous, it's part of nature, which could be part of the Rambam's hidden agenda. Now, after we've explained all this, know that a miracle that occurs outside the realm of nature is not at all protracted. In other words, it doesn't last, is not prolonged, it does not persist unchanged. Right? For the Rambam, miracles that are supernatural have to be short. For a word to become permanent, it would lead, no doubt, to concerning the genuineness of that miracle. Had the staff remained a snake, one might suggest it was a snake from the beginning. For this reason, the miracle was proven genuine when it reverted to being a staff in Moshe's hand. Similarly, if the opening of the earth, which followed Korah, had remained permanently open, the miracle would have been incomplete because it would have been seen as something natural. It is because of this fundamental principle, which I have elucidated, that I do not believe in the presence of an occurrence which is outside of nature, and the permanence of an occurrence which is outside of nature, as we have explained in this treatise. Right? In other words, if it's a miracle which is outside of nature, like staff changing into a snake, it can't be permanent; it has to be temporary. On the other hand, concerning a miracle which occurs through natural means, the more permanent it becomes, the longer it lasts, the more likely it is to be a miracle. A little bit hard to understand. For this reason, we believe the permanence of the blessings and curses, but I guess if it constantly reoccurs, that the Jews, when they sin, are in a bad situation, when they admit it's a good situation, even though it's a natural process, that's more of a miracle. But if you have a supernatural thing, it needs to be short-term for it to be a miracle. Someone may ask, why was this miracle shown to them rather than the ultimate miracle, which is, say, the resurrection of the dead? Right? Why not show them the resurrection of the dead? This question would be equivalent to asking, why did Moses effect the miracle by having the staff changed into a snake rather than into a stone or a lion? This whole matter is just divine wisdom. And I think what he's saying is, why not have the resurrection of the dead just be consistent, reoccurring miracle? Why have it be this staff turning into a snake? He says that's all. We can't figure that out. That's not physics. That's metaphysics. Not appropriate for any intelligent person to criticize us for repeating a single topic many times in this treatise. The length and explanation of this topic, which doesn't require lengthy explanations, for I compose this treatise solely for the multitude of people who are in doubt about the clearly enunciated statements in our other writings. Those who criticize the brevity of our words in regard to resurrection of dead, right? He's saying, I only wrote this to convince people I do believe in it. Those who interpret my other books to say that I don't believe it. On the other hand, mere hints suffice for those who are completely wise, right? He's saying, I wrote this for the people who are not wise, who, if you interpret my other books to say that I don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, you're not wise. For them, it is not necessary to repeat nor to provide lengthy explanations. All right, if you're wise, you understand, he says, that I believe in the resurrection of the dead. This is just written for the people, that are criticizing me, that are not smart. Okay, so I get that's the end of the treatise, right? So the question I think to ask is, what do we think? Do we think that the Rambam is being apologetic? Do we think that the Rambam is straightforward? Do we think, is couched in this? Is couched in the epistle? Is there more than one opinion here? And as he's saying, on some level, trying to show that he does believe in it, but also maybe that doesn't. Again, you're not denying reward and punishment if you deny the resurrection of the dead. That's an interesting question. Obviously, the Rambam does believe that you have to believe in the resurrection of the dead. And he goes out of his way here, obviously, to show that he believes in it. But I don't know, would it undermine Judaism to not believe in the resurrection of the dead? Let's say that you just believed in the world to come, and that you still believe in the reward and punishment. Right? And as if you believed that God brings the rain next time in this world, and after a person dies at the spiritual level, they are rewarded and punished. You don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. You just believe, like the Rambam writes about the Messianic era, that it's natural. I don't know if that's such a problem. Like for us, I don't think that feels like such a problem. But clearly there is a strong tradition in Judaism about the resurrection. But I don't know. Do you have to believe that? I think for us it's much easier than it was at the time of the Rambam. At the time of the Rambam, he clearly got a lot of flack. People thought he didn't believe. Certainly, if you want to convert, the Bezdin's going to ask you, do you believe in all the Rambam's 13 principles of faith? But I don't know. Do we feel like that would make that would put you outside of Judaism if you didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead? It seems to me that if there's reward and punishment, how exactly it works, I don't know if we have to have a belief about it. And the Rambam certainly doesn't spend much time on the resurrection of the dead, although he does mention it in a couple of places. Why people thought he. Now we can look at, there are books written, there was at least one written to criticize the Rambam and say he didn't believe in nothing. We can look at those. This, in a certain sense, is really an answer to a criticism. And we have writings of those criticisms against the Rambam. I'll try and show you some. There was one written by a rabbi in Baghdad during the Rambam's lifetime, right before the Rambam wrote this. So I can show you some of that. Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.